Los Angeles, January 1947, was a city of fractured dreams, where Hollywood's golden veneer hid a rotting heart. The streets thrummed with ambition, starlets, hustlers, and conmen chasing fame under palm-lined boulevards. But beneath the neon glow, in the alleys and shadows, something ancient stirred, a hunger that fed on the desperate, the lost, the forsaken. Clara Vance, a 28-year-old private investigator with a taste for cheap whiskey and a nose for secrets, knew this better than most. Her office, a cramped, mildew-stained room above a pawn shop on Sunset Boulevard, reeked of stale cigarettes and regret, its peeling wallpaper a mirror to her own fraying edges. But it was hers, a sanctuary from the city's claws, and so was the case that landed on her desk one fog-soaked morning, a case that would drag her into the abyss. A trembling man named Harold, claiming to be Elizabeth Short's cousin, hired Clara to find the missing 22-year-old aspiring actress. Elizabeth, with her raven hair, penchant for black dresses, and a smile that never reached her haunted eyes, hadn't been seen since January 9, when she slipped out of the Biltmore Hotel into the neon-drenched night. Harold's voice cracked as he handed Clara a photo of Elizabeth, her beauty fragile, her gaze heavy with secrets, as if she'd glimpsed something unspeakable. Clara took the case, not for Harold's paltry fee, barely enough for a bottle of bourbon, but because Elizabeth's eyes gripped her, a whisper of fate, a warning she couldn't ignore, a pull she couldn't resist. Clara started at the Biltmore, its opulent lobby, a cathedral of marble and chandeliers, where wealth and ambition mingled with quiet despair. The bellhop, a scrawny kid named Tommy with acne scars and a nervous tic, remembered Elizabeth. She was jittery, he said, polishing a brass rail, his voice barely above a whisper. Kept checking her watch, staring at the shadows like they were moving, like they were alive. Clara slipped him a crumpled dollar, pressing for more, but Tommy froze, his eyes darting to the lobby's corners, where the lights seemed to falter, pooling into unnatural darkness that pulsed faintly, greenly. She was waiting for someone, he muttered, but they never came. Or maybe they did. I don't know. Just don't look too long, lady. Clara left with a knot in her gut, the city's pulse thrumming in her ears, louder than it should have been, as she climbed into her beat-up Ford, its engine coughing like a dying man. The trail led to downtown's underbelly dingy bars, flophouses, and alleyways where Elizabeth had drifted, a ghost in black, chasing stardom but finding only leering men, broken promises, and nights that swallowed hope whole. At the Blue Orchid, a dive on Figueroa with sticky floors and a jukebox that wailed like a grieving widow, the bartender, a grizzled man named Sale with a glass eye, said Elizabeth had been there days before, sipping gin with a man in a gray suit. His face was nothing special, Saul said, wiping a glass, his hands unsteady, but his eyes holes you could fall into, deep and wrong. And his shadow. It didn't move right, lagged behind him, too long, too dark, like it was waiting for something. Clara's skin prickled, a cold dread creeping up her spine, but Saul turned away, muttering about bad luck, his glass eye glinting as if it saw more than he let on. Clara chased shadows for days, her notebook filling with dead ends, half-truths, and names that led to locked doors or nervous glances. She interviewed waitresses, cabbies, and washed-up actors, piecing together Elizabeth's final days, a blur of auditions that went nowhere, late-night phone calls to unknown numbers, and whispers of a big break that never came. A seamstress on Hollywood Boulevard, an old woman with fingers like spider legs, said Elizabeth had bought a black dress, custom-made, its fabric too heavy, like it carried something. The seamstress crossed herself, refusing to say more, but her eyes lingered on Clara, as if marking her for the same fate. By January 14, Clara's leads were thinning, her body aching from sleepless nights, her office a mess of coffee cups and cigarette butts, the radio crackling with news of a cold snap that gripped the city like a fist. The fog outside was relentless, seeping into her bones, turning Los Angeles into a ghost of itself. Its streets empty save for stray dogs and shadows that seemed to follow her, their edges too sharp, their movements too deliberate. A call came from Detective Frank Malone, a grizzled LAPD cop who owed her a favor from a case involving a crooked councilman and a stolen ledger. "You still looking for that short girl?" he asked, his voice tight like he was choking on the words. "Get to Lima Park, near South Norton. Now." And Claire, brace yourself. Her gut churned as she drove through the fog, the city's lights smearing like blood on her windshield, the air heavy with a metallic tang, like rust and regret. She arrived at a vacant lot, cordoned off by police, their flashlights slicing through the mist, their faces pale, their voices hushed, as if speaking too loudly might wake something. Malone met her at the tape, his cigarette trembling in his hand, his eyes hollow, his skin slick with sweat despite the cold. "It's bad, Clara," he said, exhaling smoke that curled unnaturally, as if the air rejected it, twisting into Shape's eyes, hands that dissolved when she blinked. "Real bad." She pushed past him, ignoring the cop's stares, their hands twitching toward their holsters, and saw it Elizabeth Short's body, or what remained. Cut in half at the waist, drained of blood, washed clean, her arms raised above her head, legs spread, mouth slashed from ear to ear, in a grotesque, mocking grin that seemed to laugh at the world. Her skin was white as bone, her eyes open, staring at a sky that offered no mercy, no answers, and across her chest, scrawled in crimson lipstick, were the words BD Avengr. The air around her was wrong, heavy, like the lot was holding its breath, and Clara swore the shadows moved, curling toward the body like fingers, hungry, alive, their edges glinting with that same sickly green glow she'd seen at the Biltmore. The grass beneath Elizabeth was untouched, no blood, no drag marks, as if the body had been placed, not dumped, with a precision that mocked the living, mocked the law, mocked God. Clara's knees buckled, her breath catching, her stomach lurching, but she forced herself to stand, her PI instincts kicking in, her mind cataloging details to keep the horror at bay. The cuts were surgical, almost artistic, the work of a mind that saw flesh as canvas, pain as poetry. The slashed mouth wasn't just a wound, but a message, a taunt, a promise. Cops were useless, trampling the scene, their boots crushing grass, their flashlights flickering, as if the lot itself resisted light, its shadows growing, stretching, watching. Malone pulled her aside, his face slick with sweat, his voice low. "Coroner's early report says she died 2 days ago," he whispered, glancing at the body, his cigarette falling, forgotten. "Skull fractured, choked out, stomach full of trash paper, dirt, God knows what, like someone forced her to eat garbage. But this," he gestured to the lot, "the shadows, the air, this ain't human, Clara. The air's watching, the ground's wrong. I've seen murders, but this, it's something else." She didn't argue. She felt it too, a presence, not just in the lot, but in the city, in the fog, in the shadows that clung to her heels as she left. Her camera heavy with photos she wasn't sure she could bear to develop. Her hands trembling as she gripped the steering wheel, her heart pounding a rhythm that wasn't hers. Back at her office, Claire pored over her notes, the radio now silent, the city too quiet. Its pulse slowed, as if mourning Elizabeth in its own twisted way. Elizabeth's photo stared at her from the desk, those haunted eyes boring into her soul, demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding Clara not look away. She traced the leads again, the Biltmore, the Blue Orchid, the man in the gray suit whose shadow didn't move right, whose eyes were holes, whose presence lingered like a stain. She dug deeper. Her contacts in the city's underbelly, bookies, prostitutes, washed-up stuntmen whispering a name, Victor Crane, a Hollywood producer with a mansion in the hills, a man whose parties were infamous, where starlets went dreaming of fame, but some never returned, their names fading like smoke, their faces forgotten, their lives erased. Crane's name tied the threads together, a knot in a tapestry of blood, and Clara's skin crawled as she remembered Sal's words, Tommy's fear, the seamstress's warning. She called Malone, digging for more, and he reluctantly shared a rumor. Crane's mansion was built on old land, a place the Chumash people avoided, calling it Quetsu, the place of hunger, where the ground swallowed the living. Claire hung up, her mouth dry, the hum of the city, now a low, rhythmic pulse, like a heartbeat buried in her bones. She drove to Crane's estate that night, the fog so thick her headlights barely pierced it, the city a ghost of itself, its streets empty, its lights dim, as if Los Angeles were holding its breath, waiting for blood. The mansion loomed, a Gothic monstrosity of spires, stained glass, and ivy that seemed to writhe, its iron gates rusted, creaking as Clara slipped inside, her revolver heavy in her coat, her flashlight flickering, its beam weak as if the air consumed it. The air was colder here, the city's hum replaced by that low, rhythmic pulse, vibrating in her chest, her teeth, her soul. Inside, the mansion was a labyrinth of velvet curtains, gilded mirrors, and chandeliers that flickered without bulbs, their light green, unnatural, casting shadows that moved when she didn't, shadows that whispered her name, her fears, her sins. Each mirror reflected Clara's face, but not her eyes, as if something else looked back, something that knew her, that wanted her, that had always known she'd come. The walls seemed to breathe, their wallpaper peeling to reveal symbols, spirals, eyes, hands etched in black, bleeding ichor that pooled on the floor, that moved, that reached. She found Crane in a study, his gray suit immaculate, his smile too wide, his shadow pooling on the floor like ink, shifting, writhing, alive, its edges sharp, its form wrong. "You're here about Elizabeth," he said. Not a question, his voice smooth but wrong, like a record played backward, each word a needle in her skull, a hook in her mind. Claire gripped her revolver, demanding answers, her voice steady despite the ice in her veins, the pulse in her ears, the hum that wasn't the city's anymore, but something older, deeper, hungrier. Crane laughed, a sound that crawled up her spine, that burrowed into her bones, and gestured to a door behind him, its frame carved with those same symbols, pulsing with that sickly green glow, their edges bleeding, their forms twisting. "She wanted to be a star," he said, his eyes holes, his shadow rising, a tide that swallowed the light, and we gave her eternity. Before Clara could react, the door opened, and the air turned to ice, the pulse now a scream in her mind, a chorus of voices chanting, "Stay, stay, stay." She stumbled through the door, not by choice, but by force, as if the house itself pulled her, its walls bending, its floors tilting, its mirrors laughing, their reflections showing not Clara but Elizabeth, not Elizabeth but countless others, their faces hollow, their eyes voids, their mouths slashed, their chests marked a VENGR. The room beyond was no room but a void, its walls shimmering like oil, its floor a mirror reflecting not Clara but Elizabeth, whole and alive, her black dress pristine, her eyes voids, her mouth moving, whispering, "You saw me. You can't leave." The hum was deafening, A chorus of voices, not human, not alive, chanting in tongues that clawed at Clara's mind, peeling away her thoughts, her memories, her name, herself. Shadows moved in the void, figures humanoid but wrong, their limbs too long, their faces smooth, featureless, their hands reaching, not for her, but through her, into her fears, her soul, her essence, their touch cold, their hunger eternal. Claire fired her revolver, the shots swallowed by the void, the bullets vanishing into nothing, the recoil jarring her bones but doing nothing to the things that watched, that waited, that hungered, their eyes countless, their forms a mockery of flesh, their presence a weight that crushed her chest. Her will, her hope. Crane appeared, his fating, his smile now a maw, his shadow a tide that rose, drowning the room, drowning her, its touch cold, its weight a promise of oblivion. She ran, or tried to, the void shifting, the mansion twisting, corridors looping, mirrors showing her not as she was, but as she could be hollow, eyeless, smiling that slashed grin, her mouth red with lipstick, her chest marked a VENGR, her hands stained with blood that wasn't hers. That was hers. That was everyone's. The hum told her to stop, to surrender, to join the tide, to become one with the lost, the forgotten, the devoured. But Clara's fear was her anchor, her rage, her blade, her will, her shield, her whiskey-soaked heart, her fire. She found a staircase, descending into darkness, the air thick with rot and blood, the walls pulsing, bleeding, whispering her name, her sins, her failures, her mother's voice, her father's silence, her own doubts, all woven into the hum, all part of the tide. The steps were endless, each one colder, each one heavier, as if the mansion were swallowing her, digesting her, claiming her, its hunger a living thing, its will a chain. At the bottom was a chamber, its floor covered in symbols that burned her eyes, its walls carved with faces, Elizabeth's, others' t'others, their mouths open, their screams silent but alive, their eyes voids, their hands reaching, their bodies broken, their names erased. In the center was a table, and on it lay Elizabeth's body, not the corpse from the lot, but alive, or something like it, her chest rising, her eyes fixed on Clara, her mouth forming words. You saw me. You can't leave. The shadows surged, and Clara saw them clearly, entities, not men, not beasts, but something older, hungrier, their forms a mockery of flesh, their eyes countless, their hunger a void that devoured hope, devoured hard, devoured tide, souls. They weren't Crane's creations, but his masters, his gods, his tide, and he was their servant, their priest, their vessel, his gray suit a lie, his smile a mask, his shadow their truth. Elizabeth's body moved, not with life but with purpose, her hands reaching, her fingers curling, her eyes weeping black ichor, her voice a chorus. Join us, stay, be eternal. Clara's revolver was empty, its barrel warm, useless, but she had her wits, her will, her refusal to be another lost girl, another name erased by the city's hunger, another sacrifice to its tide. She grabbed a candelabra from a nearby altar, its flames green, unnatural, licking the air like tongues, their heat cold, their light dark, and smashed it into the table, the symbols igniting, the chamber screaming, the entity shrieking, their forms unraveling like smoke, their voices a cacophony. Of rage and pain, their eyes blinking, fading, falling. Elizabeth's body dissolved, not into ash, but into light, her eyes meeting Clara's, not with hate, but with sorrow, a plea to be remembered, to be mourned, to be more than a headline, more than a dose, more than a dahlia. The mansion shook, the void collapsing, the hum fracturing, the mirrors shattering, their fragments cutting Clara's hands, her face, her blood mixing with the ichor that pooled on the floor. that sang to her, that begged her to stay, to join, to drown. She ran, up stairs that weren't there before, through halls that burned, their walls melting, their shadows clawing, their voices screaming her name, her past, her future, her end. The mansion fought her, its corridors twisting, its doors vanishing, its mirrors reforming, showing her not just Elizabeth but others, girls in black, girls in red, girls in white, their faces slashed, their bodies broken, their eyes pleading, their names lost, their stories stolen, their lives fed. To the tide. She saw herself among them, her own face hollow, her own eyes voids, her own mouth slashed, and she screamed, not with fear, but with rage, with defiance, with a fire that burned brighter than the void, hotter than the fight, stronger than the hum. She found a window, its glass cracked, its frame bleeding, and threw herself through, the shards cutting her arms, her legs, her blood painting the night, her body hitting the ground, the fog, the city, the world that didn't care, that never cared. She woke in her office, sprawled on the floor, the radio crackling with news of Elizabeth Short's murder, the Black Dahlia, her body found in Leimert Park, the city reeling, the cops baffled, the reporters swarming like vultures, their pens hungry for blood, their headlines hungry for pain. Clara's hands were stained with blood that wasn't hers, her camera shattered, its film blackened, its images lost, its truths burned away. Her coat was torn, her face bruised, her body aching as if she'd fought a war, and perhaps she still was. The news spoke of the slashed mouth, the severed body, the lipstick scrawl BDVENGER, but they didn't know the void, didn't know the things that took Elizabeth, that marked her, that left her as a taunt, a trophy, a warning, a promise. Claire burned her notes, poured a whiskey, and stared at Elizabeth's photo, the only thing left, its edges curling, its smile fading, its eyes still pleading, still watching, still alive, in a way the city could never understand. Los Angeles moved on, its dreams brighter, its shadows deeper, its hunger sharper, its tide stronger. The Black Dahlia became a legend, a ghost story, a warning whispered in bars, in alleys, in dreams. Clara kept working, kept drinking, kept watching the corners, where the light faltered, where the shadows moved, where the hum lingered, soft but there, in the mirrors, in the fog, in the city's pulse, in the nights that never ended. She never spoke of the mansion, of Crane, of the void, of the entities, but she felt them, always, a weight in her bones, a whisper in her dreams, a shadow at her back. The tide was patient, the entities eternal, and Clara knew, as she walked the neon streets, her revolver heavy, her whiskey warm, her eyes sharp, that they'd come again, for her, for another, for the city that fed them, that birthed them, that loved them. She lit a cigarette, her hands steady, her gaze unbroken, and waited, because Clara Vance wasn't prey. She was the hunter, the survivor, the one who saw the tide and lived, the one who carried the Black Dahlia's curse. And she'd break it, or die trying, or maybe both, because Los Angeles was a city of endings, and Clara was its daughter, its ghost, its fire.